Thought you'd never see me again, huh? welcome back to the JB Show, live on Revolutionary Blackout. My name is James Fauntleroy. I am your host for today. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you. I didn't get to see you guys last week. We had a little bit of a technical issue, but we are back. I am here with Mama Earth Angry from Twitter, and we are going to be discussing, as you saw on the thumbnail, the realization of poverty. This is actually going to be a very deep conversation that we're going to be talking about. So, as you can see here, Mr. Lila, how are you doing today?
I'm good, James. Thank you for inviting me on.
It's good. Good. As for me, I had a decent morning this morning. I had French toast and then it knocked me out. And so I had a decent nap in the sun for some reason. You don't get to do that in Florida because it's in Florida. So
like too hot.
So like what?
So it's too hot normally, but today was like right.
Oh yeah, I mean Florida's way too hot. If I whenever I go out into the sun, it feels like somebody took some clarified butter and basted me, and now I'm nice and golden brown. It's weird. But I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat. You're typically in the chat, so it's good to see that you're on screen with me. Nick Socialist MMA is watching. I'm seeing some people who I've never seen before, so it's nice to see. Knight me. Okay. I think I understand what that means, kind of like being knighted. CBC, nice to see you. Holly, good to see you. I almost said your name wrong. I'm sorry. I'm still waking up. Keenan. Let me see. Good to see you.
Hey,
okay.
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a minute because I used to do some shows on Populist Voice too, and I wasn't able to keep up.
Oh yeah.
So this is our first time talking one-on-one actually. Like we were in the same chat before,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so this is nice, just kind of having the time, you know what I mean, to what's up, Sabrina?
Hey Sabs, good to see you. All right, Astro Gypsy, hello, nice to meet you. Not sure if I got to meet you before. Let me see. Sling Weber, nice to see you. Been a while. Grocery store, deli suck, all the new names. Let's see. Thank you so much. Luca, nice to meet you as well. Let me see. And yeah, so it's kind of a somber subject, really.
I know.
And I have anecdotal evidence of poverty because I have lived through it. And one of the things that I wanted to ask was, what is, and you don't have to go into too much detail, but what is your relationship to poverty yourself?
Well, I grew up poor. So, when I was a small child, like me and my family lived in efficiency and we didn't have like hot water and things like that. And so the funny thing about poverty is, especially if you're young, you don't realize that you're in poverty. Because a lot of the other people, at least where I grew up in my community, everybody was poor. We were all in the same, class together. And so I didn't even realize that that was a thing until I grew up and kind of got out of that reality, that day-to-day life. And it's honestly, I think the reason why I felt like this would be a good topic to go over is that I didn't have shame for that. You know what I'm saying? Like growing up, like it was very normal, and I didn't have, like, I don't have regrets. And I think people get uncomfortable when you say things like, oh yeah, I grew up poor and things like that. It makes them feel bad. And it's like, it's almost like you're discouraged from talking about it. And I don't really, like, why is that?
Yeah. Have you ever, because a lot of times we grow up and kids can be mean.
Mm.
Has that realization that people shamed you for it, when did that realization actually come around? What did it happen for you, um, as far as that's concerned?
Good question. Yeah, I think when I was like late middle school, I noticed kids picking on other kids for that, and then
Yeah,
noticed that they were like very hypocritical because like, the differences were so minuscule between, the
yeah,
person who was picking on the person who was, you know what I'm saying? And I think I just, yeah,
yeah,
I think I was probably an angsty preteen when I
hmm,
realized that,
yeah, yeah,
and I think if I ever, I even as an adult, I see it though too. People just kind of ragging on people because they're poor, and it's just like, how is that a okay thing? Like, why do you think that that's all right?
hmm, yeah. I like what creative experiment says. Experiencing poverty, about homelessness, and having a master's degree radicalized me. Improved capitalism does not work. Not sure if there's an easier way to learn this. Um, it's funny, uh, and I think you would agree, is that a lot of us who have grown up in poverty, even though we've experienced it, we do not wish this upon anybody else. Yet,
Absolutely.
yet, unfortunately, the only way some people actually learn how bad poverty is if they experience it firsthand.
It's definitely an eye opener. You know what I mean? I don't know anybody who was not impoverished and then found themselves in that position was like, oh yeah, I wanted this. nobody
Yeah.
nobody finds themselves in that situation like, yeah, I did this on purpose. And that's the other misconception is like, especially with like, you know right-wing people or even some liberals, like they think, oh, you deserve that, like you did this to you
Mhm,
yourself, and you have to deal with that now. It's your own, like, that's your
mhm,
own problem, right? And there's just like that cut off from like, we're not
mhm,
community anymore. You're less than.
mhm.
And it's gross, right?
Yeah, yeah. E.G. Butler says poverty is only relevant when measured against other classes. Um, hmm, interesting comment. Um,
I think that's true.
yeah, I mean, we're basically comparing it to the welfare of other people. Um, but
Even
the thing,
just like,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, no, go ahead, please.
I was just thinking about how the first world versus third world
Hmm.
trends. Do you remember when that happened and people were like first world problems, and they were like talking about how, they're complaining about pickles or some shit, and like other people don't have clean water. And like
Yeah.
that was just the first time people saw, some people
Hmm.
like were like, "Oh, that's not cool." You know what I mean? Like that's not really funny. Because if you haven't experienced it firsthand, like that could have been your very first time to even think about that.
It's oppression Olympics.
It's
I
a
mean,
what?
it's oppression Olympics.
Oh,
And the thing is that number one, what we have, what we're dealing with, we're in the basement. So people in other countries aren't even in the house. So therefore, from what they go through, yeah, they shouldn't. It's like we shouldn't be going through what we shouldn't be going through, but they also shouldn't be going through what they shouldn't be going through. So
yes,
in fact, they need to be brought inside the house and put on the first floor at least, and we need to be brought up to the first floor. So the whole thing about, oh, we just have it better off, slightly. It's like, yeah, technically we do, but we still have it bad. It's like comparing somebody who's been shot 3 times to somebody who's been shot 10 times. Nobody should have been shot in the first place.
right, right, exactly.
So why
Yeah.
are we comparing? We don't want anybody to be shot. So therefore, let's take that out of the equation. Period. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
yes.
It's just like, I would. No, I'm not going to bring that analogy up because that's way too triggering. But you don't want something like that to happen to people. So therefore, why are we comparing who has it worse? It's just
Yeah, well, poverty exists to control consciousness, class consciousness. You
yeah,
need to have somebody that you feel better than to keep
yeah,
furthering along exploitation and capitalism. I mean, everybody who's like, oh, well, they bring up third world countries and they're like, we could be just like that if it weren't for the free market. And it's like they have this alliance to the free market, which
yeah,
is in and of itself exploitation. So, we're talking mostly poverty in the US, but, if you think about global and the exploitation of the global South to further along, countries such as ourselves, it gets to be like there's no clean capitalism. You know what I'm saying? Somebody's always
yeah.
being hurt by these practices and these policies, and there's not enough. Like the least you could do is offer
Mhm,
awareness to it.
mhm.
Instead of just like, no, I want to go Christmas shopping. Like, stop. For a second, you're supposed to be thinking about other people, and you
Sure.
refusing to think about other people is very selfish.
That's capitalism. And here's the funny thing: a lot of people think, well, capitalism is helped so many, but it also, you know, one, it hasn't really helped as many as you think it has.
Yeah.
Number two, capitalism in itself, it encourages selfishness.
Yes.
It encourages self-centeredness. And so if you're going to have somebody who's rich, you're always going to have somebody that's going to be poor, as long as you have rich people, because there's
Yeah.
somebody who's going to do without,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and so unfortunately, you have these, people who think, well, we're getting into the psychology of it all, where they seem to think this person who has all this money is somehow intrinsically better than everybody else, and they deserve to have all that money. And we always praise the person for how much money they have, but we never, but when it comes to how they make that money, we just justify it by any means. It's
Yes.
weird, right?
It's very weird, and it all serves the same purpose. Like the ruling class made the rules specifically to exploit poor people and control them. You know what I mean? It's easier for them to keep hoarding the wealth and the resources as long as we all are okay with it. We don't, it's like another form of consent. Just like you're consenting to this, just don't pay attention.
Yeah. I want to bring attention to Night Me. Now, Night Me, you just brought up something very interesting. And you use the word survive. You say, I survive currently on $816 a month. You didn't say thrive,
No.
you said survive. That's very powerful to say, because many of us, that's all we're doing is just barely trying to survive.
Yeah. And
And
many
you,
times this is like a fixed income. Like that number doesn't change often for people. Like that's, sometimes I don't know specifically the situation or if you live with anybody else, you know what I'm saying? But that number, despite what the market does, doesn't change for the people that are stuck on these expenses. Like this is all you have. And I don't honestly, the way things are right now, like, young, successful people, like, if you said that to them, they would think that it was preposterous and that that's not a real thing that somebody could actually mean. But
yeah.
why? Of course, that's a truth. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're not celebrating that I only have $816 to survive on. They're like, this is my life. This is what I have to deal with. And somebody like should hear that that's a reality for somebody, and it actually absolutely doesn't have to be, and we're not doing enough to make that real, like to change that. We're not doing anything to improve society at all.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so sick to just want to stay in this bubble of
Mhm.
wealth inequality.
Yeah. I mean, look, and there's a lot of evidence to prove these points about when people say that they survive. I mean,
Yeah.
look at this. Barely half of Americans can afford a one bedroom. This actually comes from The Guardian. It says nearly half of American workers don't earn enough to afford a one bedroom rental. In the subheading, it says about 1 in 7 Americans fell behind on rent payments as housing costs continue to increase during the pandemic. And if you look at this chart, and if you look right where it's about one bedroom, it's $20.40 an hour.
That's the rate of pay you would need to, yeah.
Yeah. How many of us right now are making below 1824 or even 1551 or even below 1360? So if that's
No,
the
I
case,
haven't.
no, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, I've been a healthcare worker for a really long time. And
Mhm.
so I'm kind of I'm unemployed at the moment, but for my career, I've been in between like the different wealth classes all the whole time. And it's
Mhm.
been so strange to kind of like watch the consolidation happen in real time and see like the pushing down of like middle income earners. You know what I mean? Like even
Mhm.
people who make, say, like a nurse who makes like $40 an hour might still struggle in their financial like lifescape. You know what I mean? Because the housing costs that keep going up don't help really anybody except for the rich people. They're
Yeah.
the only ones who benefit. The rest are all we're all stuck in this system that doesn't really benefit us. I don't know a
Yeah.
single homeowner who's like, "Oh, I'm so glad my taxes went up." No, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like most people
Yeah.
would gladly pay more taxes if there was less people living in poverty than, I mean, for what? Just for more wealth inequality?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
eighteen
And
twenty four is not even a lot of money hourly, you know?
no, it's not. And look at even the racial aspect. It says most Black and Latino workers can't afford a one bedroom rental.
Yeah. Well,
Most most of us
when
can't.
true. When the pandemic first hit, people were like, yeah, brown and black communities are getting hit the hardest. Why is it spreading so much within their communities? And it's like, black and brown people tend to have family networks set up, where we're close or like we're always in each other's houses and things like that. And we work a lot. Like most of us have, maybe two full-time jobs. And like they were like, why is COVID so bad? And it's like, because people can't afford to live on their own. There's no, you know,
Yeah.
these essential workers can't afford to quarantine. They can't,
Yeah.
there's no assistance. Like,
Yeah.
it's very frustrating.
Well, a massive population, like as far as Black and brown people, massive amounts of our populations are essential workers.
Yeah.
So therefore, we are on the front lines day in and day out. So during the pandemic, of course, we were getting infected at higher rates because
Yeah.
we were literally the people that were serving the professional managerial class as well as the upper class and the super wealthy. So we were bearing the brunt of it. And so really a lot of the rich and the oppressor class were really just wanting to protect themselves from us because we were the ones that were getting infected more. So
Uh-huh.
it's just a sad state of affairs.
No, I distinctly remember when they were like, well, it's a pandemic now, and all of the rich people went on their yachts to quarantine. And,
Yeah,
they were like, why are people so mean to us? It's like, because you suck. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't, at some point, you're going to have to come back and you're just going to be like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, you brought staff with you. Like,
yeah.
it's so weird. It's so weird. And you know what? I keep looking at what's happening in like Austria and Australia,
Mm-hmm.
was like the vaccine mandate. And like,
Yeah.
it's such a distinct, clear indication of like working class versus the
Mm-hmm.
establishment. And same thing with France too. I remember they were like burning their passports, their vaccine passports, because they didn't support it. And it's just like, we are such a weird, like, I feel like our country is just a bit delayed in like that kind of spirit of revolution, you know, like they're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, oh, I mean, but that doesn't have to be like that here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how is this cozy? How is this comfortable for a lot of us? I don't think it is.
No, it's
I
not.
don't know anybody who's not struggling right now.
Yeah. And the whole idea is we try to do the best that we can with what little what we have, but you really can't do much with it. And a lot of times, um, you'll have people who are more affluent who will say that I came from poverty and look at me now. Um, what would you say to somebody who has from rags to riches, so to speak? Um, and they're saying that, well, I just worked hard and got to where I got to.
I know a lot of people like that. You know,
Mhm.
people that I respect and think they have good work ethic. You know, people that I would potentially look up to, not because of their class as far as wealth, but because of
Mhm.
their skill and their knowledge. So when they say stuff like that, I know it's not them saying like I deserve this and other people don't. It's them saying like I worked really hard for what I have and I'm a hard worker. And I do respect that. But what I don't respect is the refusal to acknowledge and consider people outside of that class that
Mhm.
don't have, even if you didn't like have all of the privilege that somebody else might have. You know, say your parents were immigrants and now you're a
Mhm.
doctor and you make a really good, you know, do everything right. It's not to say that you didn't work hard. You know what I'm saying? But you
Mhm.
should not forget the people like your parents, because immigrants coming now to the country have a much, much, much harder time than
Mhm.
even 30, 40 years ago. I mean, it's just obscene the way we treat people. So those, like an immigrant family wouldn't be able to put their kid to through college, through medical school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could work your way. You can't work your way through that now. there's no,
Mhm.
there's not
No.
enough money. There's too, yeah. You got to feed yourself. You got to learn. You got to study all the time. People
Mhm.
don't understand that those opportunities are gone now.
Yeah.
They're not there anymore. Nobody wants to face facts, but that's just how it is.
Yeah. And you look at the way things are going, especially with immigrants. Um, a lot of them, you know, they are they are victims of the capitalist system as well,
Mhm.
and they're coming in and thinking that they can make it. You know, that whole I've made it through, and I was impoverished as well. People need to realize that they are the exception, not the rule.
Yes.
Oprah Winfrey was the exception. Tyler Perry was the exception.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of people who are just the exception. And here's the funny thing: a lot of people will be like, "Well, I managed to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that." Here's the funny part: not everyone has the mind, proficiency, or interest to be a doctor or lawyer. So just because they haven't achieved being in those industries, does that mean that they do not deserve a living or even a thriving wage? Because not everybody is mentally or physiologically designed to be in that profession. So when people go, "Oh, I made it as this," and it's like, okay, so what if everybody became that? Then would it be as proficient as a profession? Would it be as pop? Would it be as lucrative? No, because everybody's that way. But the
Yeah.
thing is that everybody still deserves a living or a thriving wage
Yeah.
anyway.
I mean, truth be told, shouldn't you want to go into a field where you're going to help people not because of the income, but because it's a passion? You know what I mean? We're not paid to follow our passions under capitalism. There's no, you know what I mean? I know a lot of people who are artists or things like that, and they get a lot of shit for, using, I don't know, like needing to spend money. It's like they're supposed to be exempt from having to participate in the system. Like none of us are. Even
Yeah.
children, who don't have really a voice half the time, or any kind of weight to stand up for themselves or anything. They are too victims of this system that is rooted in oppression.
Yeah.
It's like, why are these exceptions allowed is what I find myself thinking about. Why was Oprah, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not to discredit her as a person, but like, why her? Well, what does she do? She keeps propping up this system
Mm-hmm.
that denies other people. You know what I'm saying? And if that's
Yeah.
acceptable and it's just manufactured consent, you're getting more and more people to be like, that makes sense. It's fair. She should have enough money to give people free cars and stuff. Like, no, you're missing the point. You know what I mean? It's not about what an individual does. It's about the system that
Yeah.
individual thrives in that
Yeah.
other people cannot.
Yeah. I want to touch on something you just said. You talked about people, being able to work at jobs that they actually love or their dream jobs. The whole premise behind a dream job is also capitalist manufacturing. The reason being is because really people work to live, they don't live to work. If
Right.
you somehow get into a position where you actually really like what you do and you love what you do, great. Especially people, a lot of nurses, doctors, people who are in law and finance, they actually enjoy what they do. That's great. But just because you don't enjoy what you do does not negate you from having a living wage as well as being able to have a dignified work experience. And so
Yes.
people will say, well, just follow your passion. And it's like, we do follow our passions. We do follow our passions on the weekends. I play video games on the weekend. That's following my passion, but I also have to pay for it. So guess what? I'm going to do something I may not necessarily enjoy, but I'm okay with doing. But because of that, that does not negate me from having a living wage. It does not negate me from having, paid family leave. It does not negate me from having, my health care. It does not negate me from any of these benefits that I should be entitled to because I'm a human being. And so people always automatically think, well, you're not following your passion, so therefore this is why you're impoverished. And it's like, no, because here's the thing. There are a lot of people who are in very lucrative positions and then they'll get out of it to follow their passions. But here's the thing. They also have a safety net that they've made to back it up.
Yeah.
So they literally had to follow something they're not passionate about to build a safety net so that they could follow something they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
it brings me up to, so I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Carrey,
oh
an
yeah, I
actor
was a
from
huge
Canada.
fan of his. Yeah.
Right. So his family apparently used to live in a car. Like they were very poor, they didn't have enough money. And so he kind of worked his way into the field as an actor,
Mm-hmm.
top earning actor, and now is afforded a life of relative comfort and luxury, and he paints a lot and things like that. And he's one of the people, it's just like, I wish everybody could have enough money to follow their dreams, because then you would learn, I'm probably butchering this quote, but then you'd learn that that's not the answer, because we're conflating joy and happiness with wealth, and they do not equal this. That's not where you get happiness from. A
Yeah.
lot of studies would show that you don't find happiness or even understand happiness until you participate in true generosity, and you participate in altruism to actually get the true meaning of happiness, because it's a gift. Joy is a gift. You don't just take it for granted. You
Yeah.
can't buy it. And under capitalism, that's just what the lie that we keep perpetuating cycle after cycle after cycle is like, money can buy you your happiness, and that's just wrong. And I don't know I know that it's an uncomfortable thought to come to terms with, but
Mm-hmm.
back to what you were saying, human rights should be guaranteed. You know, you should just be guaranteed a clean environment, water, food, necessities. In your community, you should have that right. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
like indigenous people, we had tribes, we traveled together, we supported each other. And that's where the basis of community comes from, is from protecting each other, feeding each other, you know what I mean, working together for things. So like work should not be the means to an end. It should just be a part of what you do. You know what I mean? Like anybody can do something useful for a community. And we have this, I notice it a lot with people who are disabled. People are treated like they're not worthy. They're not valued because there you go, because you're on disability. And it's like, why? Just because you can't stand in a factory for 7 hours? That's not a good way to value you as a person and your worth. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
it's it's sick to just see that commonplace misconception that
Yeah.
you're not valid unless you have wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's gross and broken and ineffective, and I'm happy to see the cracks showing through the false realities.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because one of the things that I'm seeing now is, and I don't know if this is quite the evidence, but if you see a flaw in what I'm saying, then please feel free to correct me. But as we know, Black Friday um, was a couple days ago, and people typically shop like crazy for the Christmas holidays. It is a capitalist wet dream. So Saturday, yesterday, typically people are still shopping like crazy afterwards. Typically, my sister-in-law decided to go to the mall, and this is the mall where it's fairly, for middle class people, and typically it is jam packed with people on a typical Saturday. It is, even during the pandemic, because we live in Florida.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron DeSantis. So so she went to the mall, and it was empty yesterday.
Yeah.
And part of me started to think, why would the mall, one of the most popular malls in Central Florida, be empty? Well, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but that never stopped anybody a few weeks ago from going to the mall. It would be packed at that time too. And then you started to think, well, people are shopping online. And yeah, people do shopping online, but a lot of people still want to go to the mall. Nothing much has changed between the last 6 months. But a lot of workers are getting ticked off, and a lot of them are saying, screw it. We're
That's
done.
exactly right.
We're
Oh, yeah.
done being treated like, you know, like machines. And so a lot of them, like for instance, there was a story that came out that workers from a Boston market, I should have shared it on here, but the workers from a Boston market had all their Thanksgiving meals planned out and prepared, and the day of Thanksgiving, aka the day of mourning, my indigenous brothers and sisters and siblings like to call it, which is very true. Um, they decided to just call in, and not even call in, they just quit.
Yeah. Yeah. It
And
was a walkout, right?
yeah, it was a walkout. And all of those Thanksgiving meals sat in there,
Yeah.
just and with the door locked, and
Right.
people couldn't get their dinners.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, people got to eat and all that. I get it. But I'm really happy to hear and see more and more people walking out and the workers' revolution beginning, because that's the only way things are going to change.
Yeah.
If anything, the pandemic helped show people that they are very needed. You know what I mean? They are very needed. And it's about damn time for that need to go with the rates of pay and the general overall wellness of the workers. And those this is completely skewed. I mean, some people don't even offer mental health services or
No, they
dental
don't.
or vision when you work for their companies. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, we should workers should feel that they are the ones who are able to do the bargaining. And because that's the situation. You know, all of these companies could afford to pay their workers $20 an hour. They just
Mhm.
don't want to. And so now they're
Yeah,
going to have to consider that. And that's,
yeah,
it's $15 is too fucking little, too late. You know what I'm saying? People need to demand
yep.
better. I'm happy for them. I support them. We won't use Kellogg's. We just won't. I have 3 kids and they eat some cereal. Okay. So, and we were like, no, we cannot do not cross the picket line. We're not going to buy their shit until they
Hmm.
figure it out and start taking care of the workers better. And
Hmm.
I mean, it's not just an obligation as like a consumer or a worker, but like
Yeah,
as far as solidarity and class consciousness and like
yeah,
I value you, you value me, and the level of respect we all deserve human rights, we have to
yeah,
support each other through that. And
yeah,
so I'm glad. I'm glad. I hope every worker gets exactly what they want. Because
yeah,
you know what? At the end of the day, it's still barely enough.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And it's breaking down. Actually, I want to share this other article, and people talk about being in poverty, and a lot of times they'll typically talk about poverty being, you know, so they look at it as if it's a sin and that it
Yeah.
can also lead to things, but they never discuss why. Um, this is from my local station. Uh, it says large group of thieves but rob Best Buy in suburban Minneapolis. There and
Mhm.
it says uh, it was in Burnsville, Minneapolis. A group of 20 to 30 people robbed a Best Buy store in Minneapolis, stealing numerous electronic items Friday night. Um, and then I this line here it says, hang on, let me highlight it just so you can see. There's a lot. This page is very busy. It says the thefts were similar to several mass robberies that have been occurring across the United States, where groups of people swarm a store and take items off shelves and flee. My question is, why is this happening? People will say, "Oh, it's just they're just deviants and they just want to take from others." And it's like, wait. If you were to give somebody an adequate amount of money to thrive, why would they steal?
Yes. People getting upset about theft of property don't even want to hear about wage theft. They don't even want to think about it. You know? Why is your allyship with a conglomerate or a big chain store that doesn't really improve your community or the people's lives there? Why is your allyship with them and not the people who feel that their only option is to steal? For what do you think that they're just like hoarding stuff in their condo, not having to work? Like a lot of the times people are just like, well, I need to eat, I need to feed my family, I need to do
Yeah,
these things. Or fuck it, even if they were just like, I want this new stuff, I can't afford it. You know what I mean? Like that's what happens with wage inequality. Like
yeah,
we're barely scraping by.
yeah. And people will go, "Well, they stole an Hermes bag. What were they going to do with an Hermes bag? They're going to sell it to some rich prick that lives out in Calabasas, and then they're going to take that money and use it probably to pay some bills."
Well, and I'll tell you, the rich person buying the things that were stolen more than likely is going to haggle you down too. You
Exactly,
know,
because they're greedy, because they don't want to
so
spend it.
like, come on, we're the same. You know what I mean? Like, you want to feel like you're not the same. We're the same. You need to settle down. It's like I don't know why people get this like high and mighty. I don't care. I don't
Look,
think that there's anything wrong with that.
if you're in a Walmart and I see you, and if I see you, sneaking away a can of Similac, I'm gonna look the other way.
That's right. I didn't see anything. In fact, I'll do a diversion for you, okay? So you can get more, because that's what you should do for people. Or like,
Yeah,
why
because
they
why
don't
is it?
want the answers. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, they want the judgment. They want to say that person is a terrible parent because they need to steal formula, instead of thinking about why. First of all, did you think about why that person probably is a parent? That probably wasn't even their choice half the
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they were forced into parenthood. Now they're not supported. They don't have money. They don't have like any of these social programs that they need to actually keep children happy and well fed and taken care of. And people have the audacity to be like, that person's a bad person for doing what they had to do in
Oh,
this
so
really shitty circumstance, you know?
yeah. So it's like, oh, so you rather than just let their child starve, and they'd be like, well, no, there's programs out there, which a lot of you guys are game for cutting because you say they're entitlements, and then you're like, oh, well, they just make people lazy.
Or I don't want to pay taxes in a neighborhood that's not mine. Like that's just, you know what I mean? Like that whole mindset, it keeps perpetuating the idea that like others deserve nothing and others deserve more than others, and you're okay with being on one end. Like you're
Mhm.
okay with other people suffering as long as you're not
Yeah,
one of them. And
yeah,
that's just the
yeah.
problem.
Oh yeah, can I address something? By the way, right-wing libertarians, taxation is not theft. Okay? Stop saying it. Because if taxation was theft, then that means that all the shit that you use right now wouldn't actually be able to be used. You wouldn't be able to
Yeah,
drive on the roads, you wouldn't be able to send your kids to school, you wouldn't be able to do all the things that you do. You wouldn't have clean water. If
yeah,
taxation was actually theft, you wouldn't have clean water, you wouldn't have defense, you wouldn't have roads to drive on, you wouldn't have people to basically put out the fire that's on your house. So taxation is not theft. Okay. So stop with the whole taxation is theft bullshit, because guess what? It is. And guess what? Here's the funny part. If that public money was actually theft, then am I a criminal because I take some of that money to live on?
that's what they want to frame you as.
That's what they want. And they want to frame those of us, especially those of us who need to depend on the system because we cannot create a lot of economic value. They tend to look at us as leeches. And the same thing they do to us is the same thing that they did to a lot of people who are on welfare back in the 80s and early 90s. They called them welfare queens.
Yeah,
And they typically made it as, black and brown people, women especially, that were dependent on the system. Meanwhile, a lot of their cousins who are whites were also depending on the system because they were being screwed over by a capitalist system.
yeah.
And there were more of them than there were of us.
Well, and that's, for me personally, I think that that's why it's important to kind of like bring your racial consciousness to the table with you when you're trying to come to class consciousness too, because
Yes.
you should have the you should see it and understand that the division in place based on race serves a purpose, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, that isn't about us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
because so when I was really young, we lived in Houston in the projects, right? Like it was called Galena Park, and I'm pretty sure there was like an oil refinery place nearby, because poor people and fossil fuel company, they like to take advantage of these communities. And I just remember like all backgrounds of people lived there. You know what I mean? There was just like there was Chinese people, there were Korean people there were black people, there were white
Mm-hmm.
kids, there were Mexicans, like all of them. And in that area, there was more community between race, you know what I mean? And it wasn't you deserve more than me. It was oh, do you need help? Like we're gonna all help each other because we're all in the same situation. And I don't
Mm.
know why people are so scared of that idea. You know what I mean? I think like for me, being poor, I'm more scared about not being able to afford a medical emergency or provide, you know what I mean, like the basic necessities, food, water, housing, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you even allow your opinion or somebody else's opinion to get involved in that when you've got something more important to worry about? That's a
Yeah.
luxury in and of itself, to worry about what somebody else thinks about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
It's
people are
true.
too damn busy working,
It's true. It's true. And there's somebody said something really interesting. Oh, Yes, I would like to make a correction on myself. Daniel, you're correct. Taxation to bomb innocent brown people is theft. Yes, it's stealing their lives. Absolutely. I stand corrected. That's the one thing that I think taxation is theft. So thank you.
To counter the argument, we
Mm-hmm.
don't live in a democracy. We live
Oh,
under an oligarchy.
yeah, true.
So there is no consent what they do with your money. When you say taxation is theft, you tend to find yourself among other people who are just like greedy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, and I don't think that most people that say that are inherently greedy, but they've been programmed to feel selfish about these social programs and been programmed to think about them as a you versus them situation. Like, I don't need social programs, so why should I have to pay for them? And it's like, because you are supposed to care about other people and you're not a selfish asshole, you know what I mean? But like, you're
Yeah.
saying shit like that makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I live in Texas, right? So I know every type of political person there is, and a
Yeah.
lot of libertarians are like the ones who are like, oh yeah, they'll like fill somebody else's up like freezer full of like deer meat or something like that, but they'll say shit like that, not even thinking, oh, maybe that mother that you gave that food to is on a social program, and you know what I mean? The community you were building is fractured now because you don't have the awareness of the words that you're saying,
Yeah.
and the actual individual impact of those statements.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
probably why I almost despise liberals more than conservatives, because I feel like I can make more headway with a conservative person than I can a liberal,
Yeah.
when I'm
Yeah.
trying to talk about like socialism or things like that. Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's program, unless you actively work against it, you're going to be saying things that aren't true to your character, more often times than not.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
we really live in a democracy, so that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I want, and you mentioned that you are indigenous, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and one of the things that I'm learning about and I respect immensely was the type of tribes, the type of thing that a lot of indigenous tribes did, where it was basically, it's like, we are a family. So if you're hurting, then I got you. And if I'm hurting, I got you. If you have something joyful happening, I'm going to celebrate with you. And if you have something joyful, and if I have something joyful, you celebrate with me. That type of community is what we need to get back to.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that we're, especially a lot of us on the left, are trying to shift back into that direction. Thankfully, many of our indigenous siblings are also helping teach us that. But I
Mhm.
think that's the beauty of being humanity, as well as being good stewards of the land that we live on. And
Yes.
with that type of mentality, poverty can cease to exist.
Right. Absolutely. And a lot of indigenous chiefs during the time of colonialism had a lot of things to say, and I think were fairly well documented. But like, jails weren't a thing on this continent you know until colonizers came, and you've got the people who. That's why so many people don't like to talk about how so many colonizers ran away, right? Because they came here to get away from the crown, and they ended up living in abject poverty. You know what I mean? They were still under the state's general rule. The crown still had a hold on these people, and it was unfair. And they would look at indigenous people, and they would run away, and sometimes they would assimilate into that family and that way of life, and that's where a lot of the stories come from, because those people had the luxury of staying alive after genocide and all of the other things that came and plagued my people. But that whole concept of that acceptance comes, every indigenous person, no matter what tribe or their background, has been fundamentally taught to view other people as the same, because we are all, and it's that consciousness that is so scary to the ruling class. It's that camaraderie and that fighting spirit and that, that sense of equality and compassion that is concerning to the ruling class that needed to be wiped out. They can't have that when they're trying to enforce their own agenda and steal all of the resources and claim all of the land for their own. It doesn't serve their purpose. So that's, it's good to hear that people are having more interest in learning about Indigenous people and their traditions, because it's a very diverse area of study, but culturally embracing that in your culture and trying to live with respect to the land and with compassion and recognition of others, as equals is healing in and of itself. You know what I mean? You don't have to be Indigenous to have respect for other people, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they look like. That's just getting back to your roots too, because we all come from Indigenous tribes. So
yeah. I'm Indigenous African, particularly Indigenous Nigerian. So
nice.
yeah. I found that out a few weeks ago, so that was pretty cool.
That's super exciting.
yeah. So so Nigerians can claim me, and also people from Cameroon. But I wanted to share this as well, because we're still on the topic of poverty. And I want to share how messed up really this comes from the Office of Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. This is from the U.S. government, 2021 poverty guidelines. And it shows a chart of the 2021 poverty guidelines for the 48 contiguous states and the District of Columbia. And if you look at the amounts of income for the amount per household, and if you look at how much it is, if you all get out your calculators, then the 12,880 per year comes out to just under $7 an hour. And they say that's when, if you get under that, then you're in poverty. That is completely out of whack.
Yeah. It's unrealistic. I mean, and to think that the government makes a lot of their policy decisions off of charts like that.
They do.
That don't reflect, real conditions of people's survival.
Yeah.
So what is it, $12,000 a year for an individual? And that's, I can't really see I'm on my phone.
I'm sorry. Let me enlarge it. Let me see. Boom. Let's see. And let me scroll up. Can you see it a little bit better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not even. And then, if that individual made, I don't know, say like $500, $600 more, would they be like, you don't get to use these programs anymore because you're not
exactly
poor? One of the other folks that we did podcasts with, Novi, I'm sure you've met her, super sweet. I'll have to check. Anyway, she was always telling me about how like being on disability meant like her and her partner could only make so much a year. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to have Medicaid, or she wouldn't be able to, you know what I mean? And when you have like a condition that leaves you medically vulnerable, I mean, it's that much more cruel to know that people are living in these situations that they can't do anything about. What if you make, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the funny part. Everybody will say, well, you're not in poverty if you make over that amount. And it's like, says who? Look, I'll put it this way. If you cannot afford a one-bedroom, if you're one person, if you cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment, healthcare, transportation, utilities, and all these other things that are absolutely necessary within this country, if you cannot afford these things collectively based on the average of what this country has, then you are in poverty.
Mm.
So, to any of you who are making, I'd say probably under $50,000 a year, you're also in poverty.
Yeah.
If you're making $40,000 a year, you're basically in poverty. Sorry, I know you hate to think that, but guess what? You are. If you're making 15 bucks an hour, you're in poverty. If you're making $17 an hour, you're in poverty.
Yeah.
Get real.
Especially considering, not just individuals, but like there's couples, families, you know what I mean, where it's like, and every per child or per extra person living, like that's more utilities, that's more food that needs to be fed, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's a very crazy thing to think that like one of these, like, say 50K or lower individuals likely pays more taxes on their income than somebody who's in the top 3%. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that is crazy to me, because if you want to talk about welfare, let's talk about the rich classes of welfare and how they always have their hands out for money.
Let's talk about it.
Corporations and just subsidies alone get it's just, oh, but we can't afford healthcare. Yeah, if your kid breaks their arm, you better have insurance, otherwise what? It's just, it's so hard, working in the medical field really just radicalized me in ways that I didn't expect, especially growing up poor and knowing what it was like to kind of like hope that we got dinner. Like, you know what I mean? Not know for certain that and to just see people like coming in for surgery and just being like, I'm worried about the bill, but not worried about healing, because I don't have the luxury of worrying about my own well-being, because I'm
Can,
locked in this fucking system that's unfair. And
can we talk about that for a second?
yes,
So hang on. So basically, from what you're telling me, is that it's more expensive to be poor.
yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's a funny thing, and a lot of people bring this up. If I can't afford to pay for dental insurance, then that means my teeth are going to fall out.
Yes.
So therefore, that's an extra tax that I have to pay in order to keep my teeth.
Yeah, there's more out-of-pocket expenses for people who are poor than there are for people who are wealthy. So just for perspective, because not even, there's a lot of poor people who can't use a bank. Banks won't, they're not allowed to use a bank. You know what I mean? They've got to use, like, I think somebody posted something about using the post office to get money orders, or like they have to use other systems, and a lot of those other systems are even more expensive to use.
Check cashing places. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
quite a few around my area.
Right. And that's exploitative too. My mother fell prey to the whole payday loan scam thing for a while.
I
It
did
was,
too.
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's terrible. I was like, do you even look at your paperwork? Like, I was trying to explain to her, like, you cannot do this. And she's like, the way it's explained to you is like, well, it's fine. You can just borrow this money later. It's not a big deal. But then you end up paying like almost a third more than what you originally needed, because you're in a position of being exploited. And there's a whole business out there revolving around that exploitation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you too. It took us years to get back to where, because she's on disability. They were like, oh, we'll take your disability as payment. Like, what kind of a bastard does that? You know what I mean? Ugh.
I literally did a payday loan to move into the condo that I'm in right now. By the way, I don't own this condo, I rent. But in order to make the rent, I had to borrow from a check cashing place in order to get enough money for our first month's rent. And then I had to pay it back, but then I had to take it back out. Pay it back, take it back out. Pay it back, take it back out. 8 years later, when I got the stimulus check, I was actually able to pay it off and not go back to take it back out. 8 years later. How much money did they get from me?
Oh yeah. No, you're
so
it's
you know
it's cool.
it is. And you also got to think about like food expenses. There was just talking about on CBS Sunday morning. My mom likes to watch that show on Sunday mornings, and they were talking about how the inflation rate has affected food. Food has went up exponentially.
Yeah.
So it's harder for people to afford food. So people can't eat.
And they're not giving out more benefits to people who are on like food stamps and things like that. They're like, we'll wait until after the taxes. So
Yeah.
people are just, missing meals and starving basically, and that's acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, they look at me and they're like, oh, he's on disability. Let's give him $16 a month.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I think one time I requested for food stamps and they're like, here's $10 a month. And I was like, the amount of money involved with just like writing this, like putting this into account or like writing a check for that, it's wasteful. Honestly, it feels.
And you
very
got kids.
Yeah, and that's just how it was. I was like, oh my God, I don't even. It's really hard. It's really hard just being in the situation where it's just like I worked the entire pandemic just full time because I worked like I had to, right? And now I'm unemployed and I'm just like I am just so burnt out. I don't even know how to handle. Yeah, they do exploit Social Security people. I don't even know how to handle, you know what I mean? Like I've had to request, so we have like a program, it's called CHIP in Texas, which is like Medicaid for kids.
Yeah. Children's Health Insurance Program. Yeah.
Yes, and you have to. It's such a pain to do it. It's like you have to apply every year, and it's just like that in and of itself is causing me a lot of like stress and unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like why are we in the situation where kids could just go along without having any kind of coverage? You know what I mean? Why is that acceptable? I just don't.
You know what? I'm thinking because like if we actually had universal healthcare, you would never have to do open enrollment ever again. You would never have
Right.
to reapply.
No, because they'd have automatic. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's the whole.
You would be applied. Your open enrollment would be while you're still in the womb, and your enrollment would end when they say time of death. That's how it should be.
And why not even cover funeral expenses? Why is that a whole separate business you just have to figure out too? What's that about? I don't understand.
Yeah, because how many
stolen? So why are there businesses around specifically just like burying our loved ones? There's, you know what I mean? Like a funeral could cost anywhere from like I think what I read it was like $8,000 to like $30,000 just for a funeral.
Just find a big ass oven, burn my ass, and then put me in the ground.
Yeah, I think cremation is the economic way to do it, but I know, like we're all morbid right now, but it's just like this is a reality though. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are in situations like similar to ours or worse. And I don't even know how you have the mental focus to even just like try to change your situation, when you're like in it and you're worried about your next meal and you're worried about keeping a roof over your head, like you don't have a lot of time to reflect or plan. It's another privilege denied many.
Yes, but you also just touched on something very interesting. Poverty also affects us mentally.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
so people who are privileged, especially people who are born privileged, they just don't get it. They're like, just lift yourself out of poverty. There's this myth of meritocracy in this country that says, oh, all you got to do is just work hard. The heir to Disney didn't have to work hard.
Right.
The heir to Nabisco didn't have to work hard. The heir to, a lot of these, the heir to Apple didn't have to work hard.
Yeah.
They don't have to work hard. So my question is, they're still able to reap the benefits of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys tell us all we have to do is work hard, and then we do, and yet we're still in this position.
Oh yeah. I mean, I
Meritocracy.
feel like I did everything right. Like I feel like I did everything I was supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And of course, it's leave it to the labor exploiters to dictate the worth of labor. Because if you look at the profits generated, you know what I'm saying? There's some numbers missing here. There's a big gap, and nobody wants to talk about that gap that exists, and very few people benefit from it.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're trying to argue amongst ourselves about taxation is theft and social programs when they're over here living it up, enjoying us bickering over it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And this is why a lot of them are getting scared because, there was a subreddit group called Anti-Work that had over 1 million members. And a lot of those people were like, we're not working on Black Friday. We're calling out or we're quitting.
Yes. Ugh.
And so I meant to go on the subreddit earlier, but I've completely forgot to go in and see what the results were. But class solidarity is really bad for capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, don't have such a flawed fucking system as your god. So, right? I can't feel bad for, you know what I mean? Like I'm not worried about the CEOs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's funny that people are like all of the Elon Musk stands. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, who hurt you? Is he, you know?
Oh my goodness.
And it's
There's me talking about redistribution of wealth. Does that hurt you? Please lay on the couch and explain to me how redistribution of wealth actually hurts you.
Yeah. And it's not, when you think about it, it's not really that it actually hurts. It's that their hope of also being better than everybody else, or like in a class separate from the rest of us, gets crushed under that premise. You know what I mean? Like that idea that we should have some fairness and equality in our society hurts your ideals or whatever dreams you're holding on to that you are very far away from ever. You're very far away from that. Most of us are one paycheck away from being homeless. You know what I mean? And just it's that it's back to clutching these ideals that don't really represent who you are. Like you're not gonna be Elon Musk rich. Like does your dad own a mine where they exploit babies? And do you really want to be that person? And why do you want to be that person? Because Elon Musk spends way too much fucking time on Twitter to be telling people that he's happy, because I don't believe that for a second.
No, especially since his baby mama left him. So yeah, that was a dig. He's rich. I'm punching up. Get over it.
Yeah, do it as often as possible.
Yeah. I want everyone to remember this quote. I don't remember who it's by, but I want everybody to remember this quote. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar. The quote is, "To the privileged, equality feels like oppression. To the privileged, equality feels like oppression. Meaning that to them, for everyone to have, equal footing, they feel like something bad is happening to them. It's like somebody thinking that they're suffering by getting their nails trimmed. It's like, oh my God, he's cutting my nail. And then once they hear the snip of the nail coming off, they're like, ah!
Yeah.
Even though they're not hurt, they're not bleeding, there's no pain. But to them, it feels like it. It's a psychological thing. It's like, no, we're better. They can't just have. They're not better than us.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like, who told you were better?
It's that illusion of control. I think that's the scariest thing for people.
You're right.
Is to lose that feeling of control, which is put in your head in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Because none of us has a lot of control over our situations. But the people who are taking control of their situations, that disrupts the narrative. That disrupts the idea that, things aren't so bad and maybe it's hard, but eventually maybe I'll be able to, like, I don't know, go to school or something, you know what I mean? Like, because if you look at people who are wealthy, like, the things that they dream of are completely different from people who are poor or people who know, you know what I mean, what real struggle actually looks like. And that whole just like glossed over fake plastic idea in your head, like, half the people that are in those positions aren't happy anyway. I don't get, like, how do we get to the point where it's like, oh, okay, this is the best thing, you know what I mean? I can't wait to see more and more people walking out of their jobs. You know what I mean? I hope we have strikes all over the globe. In fact, there have been strikes all over the globe. We're the ones that are lagging behind. And it does give me hope to see people that are like, I'm not doing this. You know what I mean? Black Friday, I've never shopped on Black Friday. It always disgusted me.
It's horrible. Don't ever do it. I did it once. Never again. Never.
I can't. I'll go feral, I think. Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, I can't. I worked in customer service for like 3 years, and I was like, this is not the place for me. You know what I mean?
I've been in retail too. It's horrible.
I was a terrible waitress. I remember people like the Karens or the privileged people that were like, I'm so and so, don't you know who I am? And I'm like, I don't care. I do not give any fucks. You know what I mean? Pay me, don't pay me. I don't give a shit. And like, more people like that are like there, it just makes my heart happy. Like, I just want more and more of that to happen. Like, anybody that's ever been like, did you think I was being mean? And I was like, I would have been meaner. Does that help? And they're like, okay.
Yeah. Also, I also want to, give just a little bit of education to anybody that's listening. When we talk about the whole lift yourself up by your bootstraps, did you know that whole analogy was actually an anti-capitalist and is a more pro-work statement originally? So, lifting yourselves up by your bootstraps, that phrase was actually made to show how it is ludicrous to be able to do that. That's actually why the statement was made. Because if we put it in today's standards, it's grab your shoelaces and lift yourself up off the ground by your shoelaces.
Yeah.
How possible is that? It is impossible. So to lift yourself up by your bootstraps is an impossible task to do, because we cannot lift up our shoes by their laces and lift ourselves up off the ground. So that's actually where the term came. And then the capitalist oppressor flipped it and tried to make it seem like, oh, it's something that's achievable. They try to make the impossible seem possible when it's not possible at all. So That's your little lesson for today. That when they say lift yourselves up by their bootstraps, they're really just bullshitting you. So just remember that. Okay? So that's what the whole thing about Monique in London says, I don't have any boots. Neither do I.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you some boots, but you know what? I'd rather give everybody boots. And
Yeah.
then we would be able to hang on somebody else's shoulders to lift ourselves up instead of using our own bootstraps.
That sounds like such because the only time I've heard that phrase is usually from like conservative types. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do this. You know what I mean? And it's just like, of course, it's based off of the impossible, without regards to the natural. You know, like for instance, gravity. Like, we're just gonna start floating off the ground. It's impossible. You know what I mean? So it's like trying to separate people from the systems of oppression that they live in is impossible. You have to erase those systems of oppression to be able to have a fair, like, for it to even be close to being fair for everybody else. Not everybody has the same opportunities, you know, and I don't know why that offends people to talk about, because it's reality, you know.
It offends them because they feel like that they are better in some way, shape, or form. And they feel like, well, it's obvious everybody has the same opportunities. I just did better than all of you.
Yeah, I don't know about
That's
that.
that's the mentality though. They think I just did better. I was just smarter. I was just more, I just had more ingenuity. Therefore, I deserve to be better and higher up than the rest of you. That's the mentality. And the thing is that capitalism makes people think that they're better than everybody else, but socialism makes people think, oh, you're not better than anybody else. You need to stand with other people in order to do better.
Yeah. It has us, measuring and comparing and, evaluating each other solely based off of our financial worth, and most people understand that that's not a real indicator of what somebody's actual worth is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This whole financial system that we are indebted to at this moment is broken and corrupt, and just to no wonder people are so depressed, and there's a lot of sickness and death in our country. We don't have that sense of community with each other that we need to thrive. Like that's a need, is feeling of inclusion. You need to feel like you belong somewhere, and capitalism preys off of separating us from each other.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how much time do you have left, if you would like to stick around for a little bit longer or if you need to go. We are a little bit over the time that you wanted to be on because the conversation was just delicious. But if you would like to stay just a little bit longer, then that's perfectly fine. But if you need to go, I do understand.
I can stay for a little bit longer. I did, promise my kids some time. But it's been such a good. I'm so glad that we were able to have this time to just talk about this, because I see a lot of people that are hurting right now. You know what I mean? And one of the cool things, Twitter is a bit of a cesspool, but one of the cool things is seeing people that are not doing their best and that are struggling, and seeing other people uplift them, even though they may or may not be in a position to do that.
Yeah.
And they do it anyway. And that does kind of restore my faith in humanity, knowing that, there's people like us out there who just care about other people, and we see it and we don't think it's okay, and we're going to speak out against it.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah. One of the things that I appreciate is that you wanted to bring up this subject because you wanted to destigmatize poverty.
Yeah, I do. I think that that's important for us to kind of overcome this financial manipulation that we've all been exposed to for so long.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about being poor, like being a dirty poor kid running around, is like all of my other friends were poor, and we didn't, like my sisters and I, when we look back at that time in our lives where we were poor, like that's some of the happiest times that we could remember.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Most of the people that we talk to who are like, "Oh, I was poor," they're like embarrassed, or it was really painful for me and my family. And I understand that. You know what I mean? I can understand how it could be very traumatizing and difficult. But because we had a community, because we had people that loved us and supported us regardless, you know what I mean? Like that made it a very enjoyable experience for us. So I don't know. I think, one thing I would like is for people to be less afraid of that, and let this moment be a good time for you to invest in not like your financial future, but your community, because your community could be your future. If you have a strong community, you can survive anything, and I think right now there's a lot of us who don't have that, and we kind of have to work for that. Like I'm working on building mine right now, and it's been an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But I'm glad thank you for being receptive to this conversation, because I really I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, me too. And thank you for reaching out about this. You know, a little bit about me is, if anybody knows that I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey. If anybody knows about Camden, New Jersey, is that it was one of the murder capitals of the United States. That's how bad it is. My mother did not want to raise three boys in gang-ridden community, so she decided to move down here to Florida. And shortly after arriving here, we were homeless. I remember being in the homeless shelters as a very young boy. I remember standing in line to getting the food. I remember the homeless shelters kicking us out, and we have to walk the streets during the daytime in the cold. I remember those days. I remember those times. I remember living in poverty and barely having furniture inside the house because we couldn't afford it. I remember, my mom having to tell my oldest brother to lock the door and do not answer for anybody while she goes to work overnight, just to be able to make ends meet at a gas station, and having to walk to and from in the dark in a dangerous neighborhood in order to provide for us. I know what that's like. And, people would, fault her and poo poo her for, why did you leave your kids? Well, who was going to watch us?
Yeah.
The neighbor who she doesn't know,
Yeah.
And, this was the 80s, because back in the day, a lot of us were latchkey kids where we would get home, lock the door behind us, and don't answer that door for nobody.
Yep.
And then mom or, our parents would call us, periodically just to make sure we're okay on the phone. If we have phone service. Because back then, we used to have to pay Southern Bell. I remember not having a phone. We had to go to the payphone just to call our grandma.
Just a side comment. My kids don't know what payphones are. I had to explain what a payphone was.
That's cute.
Oh my god! They didn't. They're like, huh, wait, it was just out there, and I was like, yeah. Oh my god! You had to bring your change with you and like go use the phone. No, yeah, there was a period of time, because I was a single mother for many years, and there was a really rough time when I had to bring my kids with me to work. And I'm going to tell you, people judge me so hard for that. They're like, you're a terrible person. And I was just like, that's fine. Because you're not supposed to thrive in this environment. You know what I mean? You're just supposed to be obedient and just keep your head down and do what everybody else tells you to. And it's just like, being a mother taught me that I want to do everything I can to change that reality. Mm-hmm. Because when I look at the future, I have concern. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like my mom was a single mom for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't always have electricity, and we didn't, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's hard, and especially growing up, because somebody made a comment earlier about poverty being violence, and it is violent. It is violent
Yes.
because you're not seen or heard or valued or protected. When you're poor, you're just, an acceptable loss to society.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. You are an acceptable loss. Thank you for saying that.
it's wrong. Uh, It's wrong to see that happen. It's wrong to hear people like, oh, justify it. You know what I mean? And it's like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to justify it to try and make yourself look, better.
Yeah.
You can say that it's wrong too, and I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever the situation is, you know what I mean? Like it's obviously, and people like to bring up, oh well, at least they had a homeless shelter to stay in, or at least, this, at least that. And it's like, no, 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 no. That is not, like, you don't get to walk around with your privilege and your pride saying that you deserve stuff that other people don't without even understanding that you're not, you know what I mean? Like, you're not helping them.
Mm-hmm.
You're hurting them, in fact, just with your bias and your
Yeah.
judgment, you know?
Yeah. And what about the people who are right now who are living in motels right now because they can't get the credit enough to be able to afford an apartment or don't have enough money to afford an apartment? What about those people? Or the people who are sleeping on somebody's couch right now?
Or the people unhoused, living
Yeah.
in tents, they just destroyed all those tents and shelters that homeless people, I think it's unhoused people is how I'm supposed to say it, in LA. And it's like, so your taxes pay for these cops to use their, weapons of war against the weakest members of our society right now, and that you're okay with that. This is why this is how I talk to people, because they'll say some shit like, well, they shouldn't, I don't know, something ridiculous like, why are they living in a tent? And it's like, did you think that they made that decision, like, that they felt this is the right move for me, this is what I would prefer, versus having regular stable housing and food and water? That is not the situation. It's ludicrous in and of itself to assume that about people, that the most vulnerable among us deserve that treatment,
We don't
versus we don't provide. Our society preys on these people and refuses to provide for them, and in fact profits off of them, because
yeah.
when you jail people, there's these, you know what I mean, like there's this whole system of corruption that bases itself off of poor people, you know what I mean, like the cash checking places and things like that. And it's like, no, why is it easier for you to be like, they deserve that, versus like, how can we try to improve? I know it's a more difficult story path,
Yeah.
to start breaking it down and thinking about ways to help, but it's necessary.
Yeah. We don't live in poverty for shits and giggles. People need to get through their head. And also, when you said that it's acceptable in society for people who are in poverty to die, it makes me go back to the same format. If anybody's watched The Dark Knight and the Joker was explaining to Harvey Dent about the way the system is, I'm going to acclimate it to this discussion. When somebody who's poor and impoverished dies, nobody cares. It's all part of the plan. But let one little innocent rich person die, well, everybody loses their minds, right? Yeah. It's in the papers, it's in the news. It's, this person passed away. Oh my God, how did they pass away? Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But if
Or
somebody like
celebrities,
if somebody like me were to just pass away, he was poor.
and for me, that's the most heartbreaking thing about poverty is being a forgotten person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like that's I have mental illness, and sometimes some days are hard,
Mm-hmm.
And I think feeling that, like, that's a real fear, is to be forgotten, is to especially if you live your life where you don't matter to other people. You know what I mean? You're not significant enough to worry. And then when you add race into it, like, the news is gonna be up in arms over one, young, attractive white woman versus, like, all of the indigenous women that are murdered, or the black women that go missing, you know what I mean, are murdered. And where's the outrage over that? It's like, it reminds me of 9/11 and the years after, how there was just nothing but 24/7 coverage of human rights abuses and violence against an entire nationality of people over, you know what I mean? And it got to where people were like, that's acceptable. Yeah, no, that's fine. This is okay. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Just 1 second. I would just like to give some attention to this person, just temporarily, just for a second. Hello, ZZ. You say you're so oppressed by capitalism, you're on a device that has internet and costs at least $600. You know what? You're right. But you know what is even worse is the fact that these devices that were made were actually created by people who are exploited to mine some of the pieces that are in this device, and they're being paid very little for it. The fact is that a lot of us, we so happen to come by some of these devices, either because they were used so we can afford them. We probably got a little bit of money and a stimulus payment or something like that so that we can afford some of these things. And so therefore we were able to at that point in time. But yes, also capitalism still is oppressive to us. Also, just to put a pin in some things, you talk about capitalism is great. Please explain to all the people who have passed away, who have died because of imperialism, who are in wars in many of the different countries, that actually capitalism has exploited them. Namely, a lot of the wars that we're in for the oil fields that we're in right now, if we weren't trying to get that oil, then we wouldn't be having these wars in that country, which are basically being prompted by a lot of the fossil fuel companies that we have right now. We're even right now trying to get into war with Venezuela. Why? Because they have oil. So therefore, that's part of capitalism, because it is a means to make more profit and extract resources. And one more thing, also, you say you live in poverty because you choose to and not change your environment. What makes you think that we haven't been trying to change our environment?
Oh, wow.
Zizi, please enlighten me. What have we not been trying to do? Delilah, you actually are in the medical field. You did all the right things, right?
Yeah.
I chose not to take out student loans to go to college. In fact, I actually went to culinary school, and I did it all for free in Amania High School. But then I got sick. Oh, wait a minute. We did try to do the right thing, but yet capitalism still screws us over. Something doesn't add up, ZZ. Please enlighten me on that. Because here's the thing, and this is the example of people who talk about who simp for the ultra rich and the ultra wealthy, and then next thing you know, if something happens to you, then you're gonna say that it's all your own fault. The thing is that some things that are our fault, but a lot of the things, as far as capitalism is concerned, it screws people over so that you can never get back in equal footing. And anybody who does get an equal footing back, they are the exception, not the rule. Please, Delilah.
I didn't call myself oppressed. They assumed that I was oppressed just by bringing up the fact that our system is based off of oppression. Now, I'm sorry that the truth isn't convenient for you. And I'm sorry that you think you know the systems and you think you know what my life is like, but you haven't the slightest clue. And you know what? Internet, if it was under a public social program, it would be free. Why are you complaining about that? Like, why don't you think that would be better for everybody? Like, you're on a device as well. You know what I'm saying? And you're using it, you're using your privilege to come try and assert that this system is great. Why are you so mad? Your life is so great. Why are you so upset? Because it isn't. Because you're lying to yourself. you are sick with delusion about a system that is wrong.
Mm-hmm. And good for you. You are the exception. Congratulations. You're the exception. Now, let me ask you this. What about other people who did the exact same thing as you and are in a worse situation?
Listen, this person could just as easily get into a car accident and become disabled and not know how to navigate that system and find themselves a victim to the predatory capitalistic system that envelops our society. You don't know. You know what I mean? Like, these people who are like, oh, you know, being rich is my right. It isn't. It is not. You know what I mean? And you are just as likely to find yourself in a bad situation because of this system than anybody. And it's just, you know, I know it's uncomfortable to think about that.
Yeah.
But that's the reality, you know?
And just to the rest of the chat, the only reason why I gave that person any attention whatsoever was because they were a perfect example of the type of mentality that we experience every day as people who are in poverty. And this is the type of mentality that plagues the system. It's capitalist brain. It's this thing that thinks that you're just better than everybody because you somehow did something better than everybody else. And please try to explain that to me when people who actually done better than you did better than you, and yet capitalism still screwed them over. So the thing is that does that really make you inherently better? I think that capitalism makes arrogance seem okay. It makes being haughty seem okay, that you're better than the person who's sitting out there on the street that's begging for money because of a system that screwed him over. You're not better. You're just the exception rather than the rule. And here's the sad part. You're going to have to go through some shit in order to learn that what I'm saying is true. And I don't want that for you. That's the crazy part. I don't want that for you. Neither one of us do. But the thing is, that might end up happening. And when it does, we'll still be here for you. And we'll still welcome you with open arms. Because we're not like those capitalist pricks that end up exploiting you for profit. And I'm done giving you attention. So here's the thing. Kevin says, USA is a failed state. 50% of United States under poverty in free markets a myth. 65% of us knows the stock market is rigged and shelves are empty in the United States.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, we were just talking about the prices of groceries have gone up at like 30%, you know, since the pandemic started. And all these supply chains are breaking down, you know, and that's why I try to put emphasis on community, because we can't control these systems. And of course we're going to have solidarity with the working class who leaves, you know what I mean, who leaves the systems.
I had to say hello to my homegirl, Afeni. She's in the chat.
Oh, hey. Yeah. So like, because that struggle that comes from these supply chain issues that are you know, in part due to the working class taking their power back, will benefit us all later, right? It'll be better if they have better wages and they have healthcare and they have things that they need to be happy and healthy. It'll benefit all of us. It's this whole like individualism mentality, right?
Yeah.
What's mine is mine. What's yours is mine. I don't have to share.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about? If somebody said that to you, if somebody came to your house and was like, I'm going to take that, you would be enraged. You would be upset. Whoever that little, you know, troll was in the chat earlier, they would be so sad if all of a sudden for no reason, like, oh, you don't get to finish your degree. Like if something bad happens to them, which you don't want that to happen, right? Like we still care. But if something bad happened to you, like you would be just as upset. You know what I mean? As anybody else. Like half the people who have awareness did have something unfortunate happen to them. They had to live through. And I wish that there was a better way. I wish that I knew the answer to bringing about that awareness and that consciousness that is so needed right now. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of why we're talking right now, is just like to make this real. You know, it's not. Any single one
in the comments.
Oh my God.
So
okay.
so it's funny. But yeah, so one of the things that I think that we are trying to do is, you know, and the part of making it not as a shameful thing, we're going against the grain as to the mentality uh, that it's your fault that you're in poverty. So this entire stream that you've been watching is like when a counselor tells an abuse victim, it's not your fault. That's what we're saying to you. If you're in poverty, it's not your fault. And because nobody sits there and goes, you know what? I'm going to be lazy and I'm just going to be in poverty. Nobody actually does that. Because the thing is that people need food, water, shelter, all these different things. In fact, in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are the basic needs that have to be met. So nobody really does that because nobody wants to die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so the whole thing is, as those of us who are socialists, we want people to know that number one, it's not your fault. Number two, the way to try to help reverse it internationally, I'm not talking about nationally, but internationally, is to have solidarity with your brothers and sisters and class solidarity, as universal as you can make it, whether it be your neighbors, whether it expressing solidarity with people like, me and you, we're expressing solidarity with one another. I think this is something that a conversation that needs to be had more often. I encourage anybody who is in this space of either podcasting or on YouTube or Rockfin or any other platform to talk about this as it's not being your fault. Because it is basically, this is a systemic problem that needs a systemic solution. And the only way to help that to happen is by affecting the system. And to change that would mean that you influence the collective by speaking about it. Because how did capitalism and the capitalist mentality take hold? Repetition. Just because and even though it may not be true, if you repeat it enough times, right?
Yeah.
People start to believe it. So the thing is we have to keep repeating the facts over and over so that people know what the facts are. And so yes. I think that's one of the benefits of having conversations like this.
I would just like to add that there's no separation between colonialism and capitalism. Mm-hmm. In this, there's no, even looking on a global scale, there's no separation. Mm-hmm. Because capitalism serves colonialism, colonialism serves capitalism. The prison and military industrial complexes also to serve capitalism, oligarchies, and the ruling class. So, yeah, yes, we want you to know, we understand it's not your fault. We are here with you. You know what I mean? You are not helpless, though. You're not helpless. That's what I want people to take away from this. Regardless of your situation, even if you're poor or you're living in a tent, or you can still find class solidarity and consciousness with your fellows, and that will be your lifeline. That's way more important than anything else, because when that community is what we're missing. That's why we're so fractured and broken as a people, because we're missing our community. We're missing people to care about us. And we have to, it's risky, it's scary, yeah, but you have to care about other people. And I think I know more selfless poor people than I know selfless, rich people. Because there's just this consciousness that happens when you know what's at risk, what's at stake,
Yeah.
I have no desire to go back into working like full time in the medical field anymore. Like I was making good money, for a little while, and I felt comfortable. And I
Hmm.
think that some of that blinded me to the reality of the situation that a lot of people are finding themselves in. And I want to make the right decisions that are going to bring about that working class solidarity with others, so that I
Hmm.
can take some of my power back and I can help you take your power back, and we can, you know what I mean, work together towards,
Hmm.
because we're not helpless. We can change this. Just take some dedication. And yeah, I think once you get to that point where you've had enough, that's when
Yeah.
it's for revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are leaving both political parties. Both, the duopoly, because the duopoly upholds capitalism.
It does.
And so this is why a lot of people are, thinking that, they don't receive help from any entity. And people just honestly just want to make sure that their families are fed and housed and clothed and things like that. I mean, it's not anything completely, it's not rocket science. And
It's not a
discussing,
privilege to survive,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. And so, my thing is, you know, those of us who are, leftists in this space, we we have to be willing to speak to others in a very simplistic way, because we notice that not everyone, uh they don't necessarily read theory. They're not in these, leftist spaces. So we break things down by kitchen table issues, and then we can spread that message. Um, and so when we do that, then it's also a way of waking people up to what's really going on too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these aren't abstract issues. These are just the facts of, of our living conditions. It's just the facts of you have more in common with somebody who's houseless or somebody who's unemployed than you have with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So,
And if you're making $80,000 a year, you're actually closer to being houseless than Elon Musk too. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
The ruling class seems to be scared right now, as you mentioned earlier, and they seem to be trying to tighten their grip. And I think now's the right time for people to kind of, stand up for themselves and stand up for your fellow humans. We don't have to take it anymore.
yeah.
I'm hopeful, to see this happen.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love that you just said that about fellow humans. That's a very collectivist statement to make. And I think that if we try to push more towards collectivism and start to realize that we are all part of this global whole, that when you have joy, I have joy. When you hurt, I have hurt. And we discussed this earlier, especially with, the indigenous communities. Then it really is a cycle of empathy. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's been lost within, the world, and I think capitalism has a big thing to deal with that, because empathy means being able to experience someone's pain in your heart, right?
Hmm.
So if that's what empathy is, then you don't want that pain to be there on anybody else. So if you're seeing a system that exploits people for profit, even if you're not experiencing that pain, you don't want that for somebody else. And so if we continue to grow our empathy for all different people, then, you know, then I think, yeah, then we can definitely do that. we can make the world just a little bit better, even if we do it just from one person at a time.
Exactly. That's,
Yeah.
even just having, if you just try to make somebody else's day better, your day's going to be better. If you practice it, you know what I mean? If you go out in the world and you want to, just small acts of kindness really do make a difference. And I don't think that there's anything funny about, denying other people rights or enjoying other people's suffering.
Mm-hmm.
There's no honor there.
Yeah.
So if you want to be, a good person, you
Mm-hmm.
want good things for yourself. You have to want good things for other people too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
only way through it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to go. But thank you so much for having me on and having this really good, deep conversation with me. It was really good.
Thank you so much for coming on. By the way, where can they find you, and how can they support you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter a lot. I don't know. I think I'm going to start doing a lot of more direct action events and things like that and mutual aid. So we'll
Cool.
try and I'll keep y'all posted.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. And
Thanks so much.
yeah, and also, by the way, I want to make sure I say this before you go. Please come back. I want to have more conversations with you. Will you do
I
that?
would, yeah, I would love that.
All right.
Thank you so much. You're amazing.
Thank you so much. You are too. And I appreciate you coming on. You have a great day, and give, love and solidarity to your kids for me as well.
I will. Thank you. Love and solidarity too.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Wasn't she amazing? She was awesome. I have a few minutes left, so I am going to go into the chat. Um, by the way, for anybody wondering, I'm not a Democrat. So just in case. And by the way, Democrats are right wing. Let's be real. Wait. Yeah, Sabby, she definitely is. I plan on having her back. Uh brilliant person. Um and I would love to be able to have more conversations, not just on the focus of poverty, but also focusing on learning more about the original people of this nation, right? Learning about the natives, the indigenous people. I think that is something that we should know, because that is our American history. I don't even know if I even want to use the word American, because technically it's not a word from natives, but I want to know more about the indigenous people of this landmass, their history, because it is the history that we should know. Um, I want to say hello to my homie Josana. Where you go? I gotta put you on the screen, Josana. Ubuntu. She says, "I am because we are." That's a beautiful statement. That is a statement of empathy in saying that you are me and I am you. And if you're in pain, then I'm in pain. So it would behoove me to relieve your suffering, because I don't want you to suffer anymore. That's beautiful. That is a beautiful thing. Thank you for teaching me that, Josana. You are a teacher. Thank you. Um, so many beautiful people. Nah, man. Nah, I'm not. No, 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 no. No, no, no. In fact, I'll say this, Nick. You have taught me a lot, bro. Um, and you continue to keep teaching me. And one of the things that I appreciate, Nick is younger than me, obviously, um, because he's just good black don't crack. Um, and I love that he teaches me, and I'm learning how to retain more vital information so that I can help others. And so I think that is a wonderful thing. So I definitely, one of the things I encourage people to do, and Josan is always there, watch the International Leftist Coalition. That is a very interesting, deep dive into especially leftist solidarity and leftism around the world. And he has regular guests on that are very learned. I encourage you to watch that, and you guys will learn a lot from people like Josana and Nick. Also, Afeni, she is an activist on the ground. Also, make sure to donate to Freedom Fighters DC and Tour for the Poor. They're doing amazing work. And Afeni's part of Freedom Fighter DC. Rome does Tour for the Poor. Please make sure to do that. Also, donate to the Hampton House. Even though our name has changed, we still also honor the name of Fred Hampton. So please make sure to donate to the Hampton House. And also, I'll agree with that, definitely. Also, be sure to watch Sabby's show, Sabby Sabs. She also does a lot of education on Black issues, which is one of the things I deeply appreciate. And so, one of the things that I want to bring up before I go is, if you guys like the content that I do, I also have my channel. It's JB Font. You guys can look it up on YouTube. I do my show on JB Font every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so if you guys want to give me a sub over there as well. But I will be talking about some interesting subjects on Tuesday. I kind of forgot exactly what I'll be talking about, but just stay tuned, and it will be interesting. Thank you, and I see a lot of you are talking to somebody who basically is a fan of capitalism. By the way, just to let you know, as far as capitalism is concerned, and a certain person is not going to like when I say this, but capitalism is one of the reasons why I'm here. Capitalism is one of the reasons why my mom's here. Capitalism is one of the reasons why my ancestors got here, because they needed to make profits and they didn't want to share any of that profits with anybody else. So they needed to exploit somebody to work the fields. What did they have to do? They had to work the fields for sugar and tobacco and cotton and those industries. So they had to get somebody to work those fields so that they didn't have to pay them for their labor. That's also known as slavery. Capitalism bred slavery. Yes. And I know that's going to blow your mind, but guess what? That's what it is. And so guess what? Capitalism bred slavery and thus bred white supremacy. And so that's one of the reasons why we have this debilitating system that we have right now. And proponents of capitalism and white supremacy are Republicans and Democrats, both parties. Exactly. So just to let you know, one of the reasons why I'm here talking to you in your face and I'm not enjoying my life in a tribe in Africa and in Nigeria is because capitalist oppressors decided to bring some of my ancestors over to this land just so they can make extra money off of things like tobacco. And bing, I'm here. So guess what? Depression needs to end. So yeah. And also, by the way, yeah, slavery in Egypt, it depends on which one you're talking about. If you're talking about slavery in Egypt based on what was going on with them, yeah, that was bad and that shouldn't have happened. That was also exploitation, but also based on what was going on in the time ancient times, especially in the times of Abraham. Slavery as we know it was actually more employment. It's just it was called slavery, but really it was more indentured servitude because according to the Mosaic law they actually had jubilee years, and that slave actually could after 7 years be freed because it was the law. And that slave either could choose to stay with the master or they could leave. And if you abused your slave in any way, shape, or form, you were in big trouble. So, guess what? It wasn't really slavery in the same form as chattel slavery. So, yeah, you're wrong there. But, just wanted to point that out there to this particular person in the chat. Um, and so, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to feed the troll anymore. But one of the things I also wanted to bring up was, you know, one of the things that we can help people who are in poverty is by giving to mutual aid. And this is one of the reasons why I brought up Rome's Tour for the Poor, as well as Freedom Fighters DC, and anybody else who's doing mutual aid whatsoever, because that also helps your neighbor. And that neighbor could be anybody, not person who lives within your vicinity, but somebody who may even live across the country. And it doesn't have to be monetary. It could also be in different things that you do, for them. Even just giving out kind words to somebody can also help us mentally. So, do the best that you possibly can for others. And like I always said, leave the world better than you found it. And you don't have to change the entire world to make it better. You can just improve somebody's world just a little bit, and you're affecting the world in a positive way. That's one of the things that I want to convey. Love radically. Thank you so much, future dude, for that. Yeah, love radically. Be radical in your love for other people. And you don't necessarily have to know them to love them. Just know that they are a human and they are worthy of that love, because we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. So, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. And if you guys need to get in touch with me, I'm not on Twitter right now. As you know, I'm taking a break from Twitter for my mental health. I want to make sure that I'm staying centered. And yeah. So if you guys would like to, I think there's a show going on tomorrow. I'm Is it the Monday roundtable tomorrow? I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure if Nick is still watching, Josana, or Josana is still watching, but I think there's a Monday roundtable, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the International Leftist Coalition. Stay tuned for the roundtable. That's going to be this Thursday. And yeah, I will catch you all in the next one, I think. Maybe.